Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's begin. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning in a quiet urban neighborhood. The kind of morning where everything felt predictable, safe, routine. Retirees walked their usual paths, stopping to chat with neighbors they'd known for years. Mothers pushed strollers along the sidewalk, heading to the coffee shop on the corner. Office workers hurried past with phones pressed to their ears. Everyone moved through their day like clockwork. Familiar faces, familiar places, familiar rhythms. Officer Helen Carter had been patrolling these streets for 18 years. She knew this neighborhood better than most people knew their own homes. She knew which shop owners opened early, which crosswalks needed extra monitoring during school hours, which corners attracted trouble. But today, nothing seemed out of place. Her radio crackled. Unit 7, we have a call about 2 children sitting outside the Morrison building on Grant Street. Caller said they looked tired. No immediate danger reported. Helen pressed the button. Copy that. I'm 2 blocks away. She didn't rush. Calls like this were common. Kids waiting for parents who were running late, siblings resting after walking to school. Nothing urgent. But as Helen approached the Morrison building, a 5-story commercial building with offices and a small cafe on the ground floor, something made her slow her steps. 2 little girls sat on the pavement near the entrance. Both had bright red hair. The older one, maybe 10 years old, sat with her back perfectly straight against the brick wall. Too straight, too rigid, like someone who'd trained herself to appear strong. The younger child, probably 3 or 4, was leaning against her sister. And even from several feet away, Helen could see something was very wrong. The little girl's face was swollen, her cheeks puffy, her eyes glassy and distant. Her small body looked bloated beneath her oversized shirt. Helen's heart began to beat faster. She approached slowly, her training kicking in. Don't startle them, stay calm, assess the situation. Hey there, Helen said gently, crouching down a few feet away. My name's Helen. I'm a police officer. Are you girls okay? The older girl looked up. Her eyes were clear but guarded. Old eyes in a young face. Eyes that had seen too much. She didn't cry, didn't reach out, didn't ask for help. She just looked at Helen with an expression that was far too calm for a child in her situation. Helen tried again. What's your name, sweetheart? Emily. And this is your sister? Emily nodded, adjusting her hold on the smaller girl. Lily. Helen's gaze moved to Lily. The child's breathing was shallow and labored. Her skin had an unhealthy pallor beneath the swelling. This wasn't just tiredness. This was serious illness. Emily, how long have you 2 been sitting here? Emily hesitated, like she was choosing her words very carefully. A while. Where are your parents? Emily's face didn't change. She didn't look away. She didn't fidget. She just took a slow, deliberate breath, like someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. And then she said 6 words. Just 6. Spoken with excessive care for a child her age. My dad tried to help, and failed. Helen froze. The words hung in the air between them. Simple, devastating, loaded with meaning Helen couldn't yet fully grasp. Tried to help, and failed. Helen felt ice run through her veins. Her mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. A sick child. A father who tried to help. 2 children alone on a city street. She looked at Emily, at the way the girl sat so still, so composed, like she was holding the world together through sheer willpower. And she looked at Lily, visibly ill, swollen, struggling to breathe. Helen reached for her radio, her hand moving on instinct even as her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I need paramedics at the Morrison building on Grant Street immediately. 2 minors. Younger one appears critically ill. Possible medical emergency. Requesting immediate response. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Are we in trouble? No, honey, no, you're not in trouble. Helen's voice was steady, professional, even as her heart pounded. But your sister needs help, real help, from doctors, and I'm going to make sure she gets it right away. Within minutes, sirens filled the quiet street. Paramedics rushed over. People stopped walking. Store owners came to their doors. Suddenly, everyone was watching. The same people who'd walked past these girls all morning, maybe for days, were now staring, concerned, curious. Helen stood back as the paramedics worked, but her eyes never left Emily. That little girl sat perfectly still, watching everything with an intensity that broke Helen's heart. And those 6 words kept echoing in Helen's mind. My dad tried to help, and failed. What had he tried to do? And why were these children sitting alone on a city street while the world walked past? Helen stood motionless for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Those 6 words echoed in her mind, refusing to settle into any kind of sense. My dad tried to help and failed. What did that mean? Tried to help with what? Failed how? A paramedic knelt beside Lily, gently checking her vital signs. Sweetheart, can you tell me your name? Lily's eyes barely opened. She didn't respond. Emily answered for her. Her name is Lily. She's 3. She's been sick for a while. The paramedic looked at his partner with concern. Fever of 104, severe edema in the face and abdomen. Breathing is shallow and labored. Pulse is weak. He glanced at Emily. How long has she been like this? Emily's voice was quiet but steady. A few weeks, I think. Maybe longer. It's hard to remember. Has she seen a doctor? Emily shook her head. The paramedics exchanged a look that Helen recognized, the kind of look that meant this was serious. Very serious. We need to transport now, one of them said. As they carefully lifted Lily onto a stretcher, Emily immediately stood to follow. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for instruction, just moved with the quiet determination of someone who'd been doing this, taking care of her sister, for far too long. Helen gently touched Emily's shoulder. You can ride with them, okay? I'll be right behind you. Emily nodded but didn't take her eyes off Lily. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens blaring, Helen stood on the sidewalk outside the Morrison building. She looked at the spot where the girls had been sitting, at the flattened cardboard they'd used as a cushion, at the empty water bottles lined up neatly against the wall, at the small backpack with what looked like crackers inside. These children had been here for more than just this morning. Detective Laura Brennan arrived within minutes. She was sharp, experienced, no nonsense. Helen, what do we have? Helen turned to face her. 2 girls, Emily, age 10, and Lily, age 3. Found them sitting right here. The younger one is seriously ill. They just transported her to Mercy Hospital. Where are the parents? That's the question. Helen pulled out her notepad. The older girl said something that's concerning. When I asked where their parents were, she said, my dad tried to help and failed. Laura's expression sharpened. Tried to help how? I don't know. She didn't elaborate. But that little girl is very sick, Laura. Swollen face, distended abdomen, high fever. The paramedics looked worried. Laura surveyed the scene. How long do you think they've been here? Based on what I'm seeing. Days, at least. Laura crouched down and examined the cardboard, the bottles, the careful arrangement of their few belongings. Then she stood and looked around at the busy street, at the people walking past, at the cafe across the street, at the office workers coming and going from the building. This is one of the busiest blocks in the neighborhood, Laura said quietly. Hundreds of people pass through here every day. I know. And nobody stopped? Helen felt something heavy settle in her chest. Because that was the question, wasn't it? How do 2 children, one of them visibly ill, sit on a city sidewalk for days, and no one stops to help? Laura began interviewing people nearby. A woman who worked in the cafe, a man who owned the flower shop next door, office workers who entered the building every morning. One by one, the answers were the same. I saw them a couple times. I thought their parents were nearby. I figured someone else had already called it in. I assumed they were just waiting for someone. Each person looked uncomfortable, guilty, but also confused, like they couldn't quite understand how this had happened right in front of them. Helen watched it all unfold, and then she realized something. Helen perceived this wasn't a confession. This was a child trying to explain something too big for words. Emily hadn't been accusing her father. She'd been trying to describe a collapse, something that had happened slowly, quietly, while the world moved around them without noticing. Helen's phone buzzed. It was Margaret Hayes from Child Services. "Helen, I'm at the hospital with Emily. You need to get here. There's more to this story than we thought." "I'm on my way." As Helen walked to her car, she looked back one more time at the Morrison building, at the busy sidewalk, at the people walking past, going about their normal day. And she thought, they were right here, in plain sight, and somehow everyone just kept walking. Within 2 hours, the area outside the Morrison building had been cordoned off. Yellow tape stretched across the section of sidewalk where Emily and Lily had been sitting. Officers took photographs, collected evidence. The cardboard, the water bottles, the small backpack. News vans began arriving. Cameras pointed at the scene. Reporters spoke into microphones, their voices urgent and concerned. And people gathered. Dozens of them. Some were curious passers-by. Others were neighbors, shop owners, office workers, people who walked this street every single day. Detective Laura Brennan stood in the middle of it all, coordinating the investigation. She'd called in additional officers to help with interviews. "I want to talk to everyone who works in this building," Laura instructed. "Everyone who walks this route regularly. I want to know who saw these girls and when." Officer Martinez approached with his notepad. "Detective, I've interviewed 12 people so far. 10 of them recognize the girls from the photos." Laura's jaw tightened. "And?" "Most said they saw them over the past week. Some said longer. But no one stopped to ask if they were okay." Laura looked at the busy sidewalk, at the cafe directly across the street, at the flower shop, the convenience store, the office building entrance. This wasn't some isolated alley. This was one of the most trafficked blocks in the neighborhood. She walked into the Morrison building and spoke to the property manager, a middle-aged man named Robert Chen. "Mr. Chen, how often do you pass through this entrance?" "Every day, multiple times. I manage 3 properties in this area." Laura showed him photos of Emily and Lily. "Have you seen these children before?" Robert's face went pale. "Yes, I saw them several times this week. Maybe last week too." "Did you speak to them?" "No, I thought they were waiting for someone. There are always people coming and going from this building. I assumed their parents were inside." "Did you ever see any adults with them?" Robert hesitated. "No. Now that I think about it, no, they were always alone." Laura wrote this down. "And it didn't occur to you to ask if they needed help?" Robert looked genuinely distressed. "I thought someone else. I mean, there are always people around. I assumed someone was watching them." It was the same phrase Laura had heard over and over. Someone else. She interviewed the cafe owner next, a woman named Patricia, who'd owned the coffee shop for 15 years. "I saw them," Patricia admitted quietly, wringing her hands. "The older girl came in once and bought a bottle of water with exact change. She was so polite, so careful with her money." "When was this?" "Maybe 5 days ago. A week? I'm not sure." "Did you think it was strange that a 10-year-old was buying water by herself?" Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "I should have. But she seemed fine, responsible. I thought maybe her parents were nearby and had sent her to get water." "Did you see where she went after?" "Back outside to the younger girl." Patricia covered her mouth. "Oh God, they were right there, right across the street, and I just went back to work." Laura interviewed more people. A mail carrier who'd walked past the girls 3 times. A jogger who ran this route every morning. A businessman who entered the Morrison building daily. The stories were all variations of the same theme. "I saw them. I thought they were waiting for someone. I assumed someone else was handling it. As the afternoon wore on, someone placed a bouquet of flowers near where the girls had been sitting. Then another, then more. A small memorial was forming, not for lives lost, but for something else. For chances missed. For moments when action could have changed everything." Laura stood back and observed. A young mother approached the memorial, tears streaming down her face. She placed a stuffed animal on the growing pile and whispered, "I'm so sorry." An elderly man stood nearby, leaning on his cane. He spoke to no one in particular. "I walk past here every single morning. I saw those girls, and I kept walking because—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Because why? Because it was easier to assume than to act. Because stopping meant getting involved. Because surely someone else, someone more responsible, more capable, more official, was already taking care of it. A reporter approached Laura. "Detective Brennan, can you confirm that 2 children were found abandoned here?" Laura chose her words carefully. "I can confirm that 2 children were found in need of medical attention at this location. The investigation is ongoing." "Is it true the father is missing?" "We are working to locate the children's guardian, yes." "How long were they here?" Laura looked at the memorial, at the flowers, at the guilty faces surrounding the scene. "Long enough that it shouldn't have taken a 911 call to notice them." The reporter paused, surprised by the directness of the answer. But Laura meant every word. Because the real crime here wasn't just what one parent had done. It was what an entire community had failed to do. Someone in the crowd murmured, almost like a confession, almost like a prayer, "I thought someone was taking care of them." But no one had been. And now, 2 little girls were paying the price. 1 year earlier, the Bennett apartment was small but filled with warmth. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a table just big enough for 4, a living room with photos on every wall. It was a Sunday morning. Pancakes sizzled on the stove. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Rebecca Bennett stood at the kitchen counter, her red hair, the same vibrant shade as her daughter's, pulled back in a loose ponytail. She hummed softly as she worked, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. Emily sat at the table, coloring in a workbook. Lily was in her high chair, banging a plastic spoon and giggling. "Almost ready," Rebecca said, sliding pancakes onto plates. "Emily, can you get the syrup?" Emily jumped up. "Can I have chocolate chips?" "Just a few," Rebecca smiled. David walked in from the bedroom, pulling on his jacket for work. He looked different then, lighter, present. He kissed Rebecca on the cheek. "Smells amazing." "Sit, eat. You've got 20 minutes before your shift." David sat beside Emily and tapped Lily's nose gently. "How's my little troublemaker?" Lily squealed with delight. For that moment, everything was perfect. Ordinary, safe. Rebecca knew things that kept the family running. She knew exactly when Lily would wake up at night. She knew which drawer held the children's medicine. She knew Emily's teacher's name, how to stretch $30 into a week's worth of meals, when to call the landlord about the leaky faucet. Rebecca was the invisible map of their family, all the small, essential knowledge that made everything work. And when she got sick, she took that map with her. It started with a persistent cough. "It's nothing," Rebecca insisted when David suggested she see a doctor. "Just a cold. I'll be fine." But it wasn't nothing. Within 3 weeks, the cough worsened. She couldn't catch her breath. She lost weight rapidly. One morning, David found her collapsed in the bathroom, too weak to stand. "We're going to the hospital," he said, his voice tight with fear. "Right now." The doctors admitted her immediately. Severe pneumonia, complications. They kept her for tests, treatment, monitoring. David tried to hold everything together. He worked. He visited Rebecca every evening. He took care of Emily and Lily as best he could. But he didn't know where Rebecca kept the spare house keys. Didn't know which bills were due when. Didn't know Lily's exact nap schedule, or that Emily needed her spelling folder signed every Friday. The medical bills started arriving. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. David began missing work to stay at the hospital. His boss was understanding at first, then less so. "David, I need someone reliable. If you can't commit to your shifts, I'll be here, I promise." But promises were getting harder to keep. 4 weeks after Rebecca was admitted, the doctors called David into a quiet room. He knew before they said a word. David came home alone that night. Emily was staying with a neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd been watching the girls. When David walked through the door, Emily took one look at his face and understood. "Daddy?" David collapsed to his knees and pulled her into his arms. He couldn't speak. He just held her while his world shattered around him. Lily was too young to understand. She kept asking, "Where's Mama? When is Mama coming home?" Emily looked at her father's devastated face and learned something that would change her forever. Sometimes the people you need most don't come home. The funeral was small. A few neighbors, some of David's co-workers. The girls sat in the front row, Lily on David's lap, Emily holding his hand. David stared at the casket and felt himself breaking apart. How do I do this alone? Rebecca knew everything. How do I be both of us? He had no answer. After the funeral, David sat in the dark apartment for hours, days. The bills piled up, unopened, unread. The phone rang, unanswered. Rebecca's coffee mug still sat on the counter. Her sweater still hung on the back of the chair. Emily learned quickly. She made peanut butter sandwiches for Lily. She turned on cartoons to keep her quiet. She stopped asking Daddy for things because he didn't seem to hear anymore. 3 months after Rebecca died, the eviction notice came. David held it in his trembling hands, reading the same words over and over, but they wouldn't make sense. Final notice. You have 30 days to vacate. We'll figure it out, he whispered to Emily, his voice hollow. We'll find somewhere else. But there was nowhere else. No family nearby. No savings. Everything had gone to medical bills. No job. He'd been let go for missing too many shifts. Rebecca had known how to ask for help. She'd known which agencies to call, which neighbors to lean on, which forms to fill out. But Rebecca was gone, and David didn't know how to navigate a world without her. The scene fades. David sitting alone in the empty apartment, Rebecca's belongings still scattered around him, the map of their family lost forever, 5 months after Rebecca's death. David sat in his car in a grocery store parking lot, staring at the eviction notice. His hands shook as he read the words for the 10th time. Final warning. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. In the back seat, Emily had arranged blankets into a small nest for herself and Lily. Lily was asleep, her thumb in her mouth. Emily was awake, watching her father with eyes that had grown too old, too fast. Daddy? Are we going inside? David didn't answer. His mind felt like static, loud but empty. He'd stopped looking for work weeks ago. Couldn't focus during interviews. Couldn't remember what day it was half the time. Not today, sweetheart. But we need food. David looked at the crumpled bills in the cup holder. $4. That was all that remained. Tomorrow, he said quietly. We'll go tomorrow. But tomorrow kept not coming. When the sheriff arrived to enforce the eviction, David was sitting on the floor of the empty apartment, surrounded by boxes he hadn't managed to pack. Mr. Bennett, I'm sorry, but you need to leave now. David stood slowly, moving like every muscle hurt. He gathered what little they had, 2 duffel bags, some clothes, Lily's stuffed rabbit that Rebecca had made. Where will you go? The sheriff asked, not unkindly. David didn't answer because he didn't know. They tried a shelter first. It had strict rules. No staying during the day, 2-week maximum, check in by 7 p.m., or lose your bed. David tried to follow the rules. But some days he'd lose track of time completely. He'd sit on a bench somewhere, staring at nothing, unable to move, while the hours slipped past. Emily became the one who watched the clock, who reminded him when they needed to leave, who made sure they arrived on time, who kept Lily quiet so they wouldn't get in trouble. She was 10 years old, but she'd learned to think like someone much older. One night, they arrived at the shelter 15 minutes late. David had been sitting in the park, lost in his own mind, and Emily hadn't been able to pull him out of it in time. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, the coordinator said. Rules are rules. Your beds have been given to another family. David stood there holding Lily, Emily beside him. He wanted to argue, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. They walked through the city until they found the Morrison Building, a commercial building with a sheltered entrance area. David sat down against the wall. We'll stay here tonight, he told the girls. Just one night until I figure something out. But one night became 2, then 3, then a week. Emily did what she could. She filled water bottles at a public fountain. She bought crackers with the coins she found on the sidewalk. She kept Lily as comfortable as possible. She never complained, never cried where anyone could see. Then Lily got sick. It started with a fever. Then her face began to swell, just slightly at first. Then her stomach started to look bloated, distended. Emily begged her father, "Daddy, something's wrong with Lily. She needs a doctor." David's eyes were wild with panic. "We can't afford a doctor. And if we go to a hospital, they'll ask questions. They'll take you both away from me. I can't lose you too." "But she's really sick." "I'll fix it," David said desperately. "I'll fix it. I promise." He pulled out his phone, battery nearly dead, and searched frantically. Home remedies for swelling in children. Natural cures for kidney problems. What to do when you can't afford medical care. He found websites that promised solutions. Easy, natural, affordable. Written by people who claimed doctors didn't want you to know these secrets. David scraped together money and bought herbs, vinegar, other ingredients from a dollar store. He mixed them following instructions from a blog he barely understood. "Lily, baby, you need to drink this," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "It'll help the swelling go down." Lily took a sip and immediately started crying. It burned her throat and stomach. I know. I'm sorry." David's voice broke. "Just a little more." But Lily refused, turning her face away. Over the next 2 days, Lily got worse. The swelling increased. She stopped eating, stopped playing, just lay on the cardboard, barely responsive. David sat with his back against the Morrison building wall, staring at nothing. His mind was fracturing under the weight of grief, failure, and overwhelming fear. "I'm killing her, just like I killed everything else. Rebecca, I don't know what to do." And then, on the 3rd morning, something inside David broke completely. His mind shut down, a final, desperate escape from unbearable reality. He stood up, looked at Emily and Lily, his daughters, his responsibility. "Stay here," he said, his voice flat, disconnected. I need to figure this out. Just wait here." And then he walked away. Not planned, not decided. His body simply moved while his mind went somewhere else entirely. Emily woke up an hour later. "Daddy?" She looked around. He wasn't there. "Daddy!" she called louder. But he was gone, and Emily was alone with her dying sister. 3 days after David disappeared, Emily sat in a quiet room at Mercy Hospital. The walls were painted a soft blue. There was a box of tissues on the table. A woman sat across from her, Margaret Hayes, a social worker with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Emily," Margaret said softly, "I know you've answered a lot of questions already, but I need to understand what happened so we can help you and Lily. Is that okay?" Emily nodded. She sat perfectly straight in her chair, back not touching the cushion, hands folded in her lap. Margaret noticed. "You know, you can relax here. You can sit however feels comfortable." Emily didn't move. "I'm okay like this." Margaret didn't push. "Can you tell me about when your sister got sick? When did you first notice something was wrong?" Emily's voice was quiet, measured, like she was choosing each word with great care. Her face started getting puffy, and her stomach. It happened slowly. At first I thought maybe she was just gaining weight, but then it kept getting worse. "Did your dad notice?" "Yes." He got really worried. "He said she needed medicine, but we didn't have money for a doctor." "So what did he do?" "He looked things up. On his phone. He found something that was supposed to help." Emily paused. "He mixed things together, herbs and other stuff. He said it would make the swelling go down." Margaret wrote carefully, keeping her expression neutral. "And what happened when Lily drank it?" "She cried. She said it hurt. Dad tried to get her to drink more, but she wouldn't." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "And then she got worse. The swelling got worse. She stopped eating. She just laid there." "And then your dad left?" Emily nodded slowly. "He kept saying, 'I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.' He looked so scared. And then one morning he stood up and said we should wait there. that he needed to figure things out. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But he didn't come back. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Emily, when Officer Carter found you this morning, you said something to her. Do you remember what you said? Emily looked down at her hands. I said my dad tried to help and failed. Why did you choose those words? Those 6 specific words? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Because that's what happened. He tried, he really tried. But he didn't know how to fix it. And I didn't know how to explain all of that to the police officer, so I said what was true. Margaret felt something crack in her chest. Emily, did you practice what you would say if someone found you? Emily looked up, surprised. How did you know? Because you spoke very carefully, like you'd thought about it. I did think about it, Emily admitted. Every time someone walked past us, I thought maybe this time they'll stop. And if they do, what do I say? How do I explain? She wiped her eyes. I didn't want to get Daddy in trouble, but I also needed someone to help Lily. Margaret's throat tightened. This 10-year-old had been rehearsing how to ask for help, weighing every word, trying to protect her father while also saving her sister. Emily, why didn't you just tell someone your sister was sick and you needed help? Because I was scared, Emily said simply. Scared they'd think we were bad kids, scared they'd separate us, scared they'd be angry at Daddy. She looked at Margaret with those 2 old eyes. So I practiced being polite, being calm, using the right words. There was a knock on the door. Officer Helen Carter stepped in. Margaret, can I speak with you? Margaret excused herself and stepped into the hallway. We located David Bennett, Helen said quietly. He was found at a bus station 80 miles north. He's confused, disoriented, barely remembers his own name. Is he dangerous? No. He's broken. Helen glanced back through the window at Emily. That little girl is still protecting him, even now. Margaret nodded. Helen, I need you to understand something. When Emily said those 6 words to you, my dad tried to help and failed. She wasn't making an accusation. She was trying to explain something too big and too complicated for a child to put into words. Helen perceived. This wasn't a confession. This was a child trying to explain something too big for words. Helen looked at Emily through the window, sitting perfectly straight, hands folded, choosing every movement carefully. She's been training herself, Helen said quietly. Training herself to be strong, to be calm, to say the right things. Yes, Margaret agreed, and that's one of the saddest things I've ever seen. Inside the room, a nurse had brought Emily a juice box and crackers. Emily took them with a quiet thank you, then set them aside untouched. Even now, even safe, she was still being careful, still being good, still trying not to be a burden. Because somewhere along the way, she'd learned that asking for help required perfect words, perfect behavior, perfect timing. And even then, it might not be enough. Detective Laura Brennan sat at her desk, reviewing the growing file on the Bennett family. She'd spent the entire afternoon piecing together a timeline, and what she'd found troubled her deeply. David Bennett, 38 years old. Wife Rebecca died 10 months ago from complications of pneumonia. Medical bills had bankrupted them. He'd lost his job 7 months ago, evicted 5 months ago. After that, nothing. The family had simply vanished from every system. Laura picked up her phone and called the school district. This is Detective Brennan with Millbrook PD. I need information on a student named Emily Bennett, age 10. She should be enrolled at Lincoln Elementary. There was typing on the other end. Yes, I have her here, but she hasn't attended since, let me see, 3 months ago. And did anyone follow up on that? A report was filed with the district office, standard procedure for extended absences. What happened with the report? More typing. It looks like it was logged, but there's no record of follow-up action. No home visit, no phone calls. Laura felt anger rising in her chest. So, a 10-year-old disappeared from school 3 months ago and no one checked? I'm sorry, Detective. It looks like it fell through the cracks. Laura hung up and turned to Officer Martinez, who'd been conducting interviews all day. What did you find? Martinez opened his notepad. I interviewed 43 people who either work in the Morrison building or regularly pass by that location. 26 of them recognized Emily and Lily from the photos. And how many stopped to help? None. Laura stood and walked to the window. None. Most said the same thing. They assumed the girls were waiting for someone. That their parents were nearby, that someone else had probably already helped. Laura thought about that phrase, someone else. It was the perfect shield against responsibility. As long as you could assume someone else was handling it, you didn't have to act. Her phone rang. It was Dr. Pemberton from the hospital. Detective, I've completed Lily Bennett's full medical evaluation. What did you find? Severe chronic malnutrition, untreated bacterial infection. Acute kidney stress causing fluid retention. That's why she was so swollen. Her body was essentially shutting down. Laura closed her eyes. And the substance her father gave her? It made things worse, certainly. It was a dangerous mixture of herbs and vinegar that caused irritation to her throat and stomach. But Detective... Dr. Pemberton paused. That's not what nearly killed her. What do you mean? Lily has been systematically neglected for months. The malnutrition, the infection, the kidney problems, these didn't happen overnight. This child was dying slowly while living in full view of the public. Laura felt her jaw tighten. How long has she been this sick? Based on her labs and physical findings, I'd estimate 3 to 4 months. Possibly longer. 3 to 4 months, Laura repeated, while they were living outside the Morrison building. Exactly. Dr. Pemberton's voice was firm. I'm including this in my official report. An employee from the building left a cup of water near the girls one morning and walked away without asking if they needed help. The detail hit Laura hard. Someone had noticed enough to bring water, had been close enough to help, and had chosen to walk away. Thank you, doctor. After hanging up, Laura returned to Martinez. I want you to find that employee, the one who left water. Already did, Martinez said. His name is Kevin Ross. Works on the 3rd floor. IT department. 20 minutes later, Kevin Ross sat across from Laura in an interview room. He was in his 30s, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Ross, did you see Emily and Lily Bennett outside the Morrison building? Kevin nodded slowly. Yes, several times over the past couple weeks. Did you speak to them? No, but one morning, the little one looked really thirsty, so I bought a bottle of water from the cafe and left it near them. And then, Kevin looked down. And then I went to work. You didn't ask if they were okay, if they needed help. I thought about it, but I was running late. And I figured if they really needed help, someone would have called the police by now. There are always people around. Security guards, shop owners. He looked up, his expression pained. I thought someone else was handling it. Laura studied him. Kevin wasn't a bad person. He'd noticed the girls enough to bring them water. But he'd stopped short of actually helping, because helping meant getting involved, asking hard questions, taking responsibility, and it was so much easier to assume someone else had already done that. After Kevin left, Laura stood alone in the interview room. She thought about all the people who'd walked past those girls, office workers, joggers, mothers with strollers, retirees on their morning walks, good people, normal people. People who saw, wondered, and kept walking because surely someone else was watching. The question isn't who did this, Laura realized. It's who didn't do anything when they could have. And that question had an uncomfortable answer. Almost everyone. By the next morning, the story had spread across Millbrook and beyond. 2 sisters found living on City Street. Father missing after giving child dangerous home remedy community. Asks, why didn't anyone stop? At the corner cafe on Main Street, the morning news played on repeat. People gathered with their coffee, watching footage of the Morrison building, the hospital, David Bennett being brought in by police. I can't believe this happened here, a woman said, shaking her head. Right in the middle of our neighborhood. How could a father do that to his own children? Another added. An older man at the counter spoke quietly. I walk past that building every morning on my way to the library. I, I think I saw those girls. More than once. The cafe went silent. Did you stop? Someone asked. The man looked down at his coffee. No, I thought their parents were probably inside the building, working or something. I didn't want to intrude. A younger woman near the window spoke up. I saw them too. Last week. The older girl was sitting so still, and the little one was sleeping against her. It looked odd, but there were other people around. I figured if something was really wrong, someone would have done something. One by one, people began sharing similar confessions. I saw them. I wondered if they were okay. I assumed someone was watching them. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding and shame. Online, the comments were even more intense. The father should be in prison for life. He was mentally ill and grieving. Where was the community support? Mental illness doesn't excuse endangering children. But where were the neighbors, the school, the people who walked past them every day? At Mercy Hospital, Emily sat beside Lily's bed. Lily was awake now, her swelling reduced, her color better. The IV fluids and antibiotics were working. She looked more like a child and less like a medical emergency. Emmy? Lily whispered. Yeah, Lil. Where's Daddy? Emily's chest tightened. She'd been dreading this question. He's getting help, the kind of help grown-ups need when they're really sad. Is he coming back? I don't know. Lily's eyes filled with tears. I miss Mama. Emily climbed carefully onto the bed and held her sister. I know. Me too. A nurse came in to check Lily's vitals. She smiled warmly. You're doing so much better, Lily. The doctors are very happy with your progress. After the nurse left, Emily stared out the window. She could see the city from here, the buildings, the streets, the people going about their normal lives, and she wondered how many of them had walked past her and Lily, how many had seen but not stopped, how many had thought, someone else will handle it. Down the hall, Margaret Hayes was on the phone with the district attorney's office. Yes, I understand the charges are serious, Margaret said, but I'm asking you to look at the full context. David Bennett didn't hurt his children out of cruelty. He made catastrophic decisions while experiencing untreated mental illness and complete isolation. The DA's voice was firm through the phone. That doesn't change the fact that his daughter nearly died. I'm not saying it does. I'm saying that if we only punish David and don't examine how this family fell through every safety net, we've learned nothing. What are you proposing? Psychiatric evaluation, treatment-focused sentencing if appropriate, and a community-wide review of how we identify families in crisis before they reach this point. There was a pause. The community wants accountability, Margaret. Then let's give them the right kind of accountability, Margaret said. Let's make them accountable too. For walking past, for assuming, for not stopping. After she hung up, Margaret walked back to Lily's room. Emily was still by the window watching the city below. Emily, Margaret said gently. How are you feeling? Emily didn't turn around. Everyone's talking about my dad like he's a monster. I know, people are trying to make sense of something that's hard to understand. But he's not a monster. He's just... Emily searched for the words. He's just broken. And nobody helped him before he broke all the way. Margaret sat down beside her. You're right, and that's what a lot of people are starting to realize. Will it change anything? Margaret was quiet for a moment. I hope so. Emily turned back to the window. I keep thinking about all those people who walked past us, all the people who saw us every day. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. They're not monsters either. They just didn't think it was their job to care. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. This 10-year-old understood something most adults struggled to accept, that the greatest harm often comes not from deliberate cruelty, but from comfortable indifference, from the assumption that someone else, anyone else, will step in, from the silent agreement that it's not our responsibility. Emily, Margaret said softly, you're one of the wisest people I've ever met. Emily shrugged. I just pay attention, because if I don't, nobody else will. And in that simple statement was the tragedy of her entire childhood. Dr. Richard Pemberton sat in his office at Mercy Hospital, reviewing Lily Bennett's complete medical file for the fifth time. He'd been a pediatrician for 29 years, and he needed to get every detail exactly right. The numbers told a devastating story. Lily was severely malnourished. Her weight was in the second percentile for her age. She had multiple untreated bacterial infections. Her kidney function tests showed significant stress and early damage. Blood work revealed chronic vitamin deficiencies and anemia. The fluid retention, the swelling that had made her face and abdomen distend, was her body's response to prolonged malnutrition and infection. Her kidneys were struggling. Her liver was under stress. And yes, the homemade remedy her father had given her had made things worse. The acidic mixture had caused chemical irritation to her throat and stomach lining, but it hadn't caused the underlying crisis. That had been building for months. Dr. Pemberton picked up the phone and called Detective Brennan. "Detective, I'm finalizing my report on Lily Bennett. I wanted to discuss my findings with you directly." "I'm listening." The substance David Bennett administered was harmful and showed catastrophic judgment, but it's not what nearly killed her. He paused. Lily has been suffering from severe, systematic neglect for months. If someone had brought her to medical attention even 6 weeks ago, all of this could have been prevented. Laura was quiet. So the home remedy was just the final crisis that forced intervention, but the real damage was accumulating slowly over time while she lived in full public view. "How long has she been this sick, doctor?" "Based on her lab results and physical examination, I'd estimate 3 to 4 months of progressive decline." Laura felt the weight of that timeline. 3 to 4 months. While people walked past every single day, Dr. Pemberton continued, "I'm including a specific statement in my official report. I want the court to understand this clearly." "What does it say?" He read aloud. "This child's critical condition was not the result of a single incident. The body didn't fail all at once. It was giving up while the world walked past." The silence on the line was heavy. "That's a powerful statement, doctor," Laura said finally. "It's the truth." After hanging up, Dr. Pemberton walked down to Lily's room. Emily was there, as always, sitting beside her sister's bed. Lily was awake, coloring in a book a volunteer had brought. She looked so much better. The swelling dramatically reduced, color returning to her cheeks, energy slowly coming back. "How are my patients today?" Dr. Pemberton asked gently. "Good," Emily said. "Lily ate all her breakfast." "That's excellent." He checked Lily's chart. "Emily, I want you to know something important. Your sister is going to be okay. She's getting stronger every day." "Because of the medicine?" "Yes, but also because you kept her alive when things were very hard." He paused. "You gave her water. You kept her safe. You didn't give up. That matters." Emily looked down. "But I couldn't make her better." "You weren't supposed to. You're 10 years old. Making her better was the job of doctors and other adults." Dr. Pemberton's voice was gentle but firm. "What happened to Lily wasn't your fault." "Then whose fault is it?" Dr. Pemberton sat down. "A lot of people share that responsibility. Your father for not asking for help. The community for not offering it. The systems meant to protect children for failing to find you." He looked at Emily directly. "We all carry a piece of this." Emily absorbed that silently. After he left, she sat thinking about what he'd said, about all the people who could have helped, and didn't. David Bennett sat in an interrogation room at Millbrook Police Station, his hands folded on the metal table. He looked like a shadow of himself, gaunt, unshaven, eyes hollow and distant. Beside him sat his public defender, Rachel Torres, a compassionate attorney who'd been assigned to his case. Detective Laura Brennan sat across from him, her recorder running. "Mr. Bennett, do you understand why you're here?" David nodded slowly. His voice was barely audible. "My daughters, I left them." "Yes, I need you to tell me, in your own words, what happened." David stared at his hands for a long moment. I don't know where to start." "Start with your wife, Rebecca." At the mention of her name, David's eyes filled with tears. "Rebecca was..." She was everything, the center of our family. When she got sick, his voice broke. When she died, I fell apart. I tried to hold on. I tried so hard. But I didn't know how to do what she did. I didn't know how to keep us together. What happened after she died? I lost my job, then our home. I kept telling myself I just needed one more day to figure things out, that I could handle it. He looked up, his expression devastated. But I couldn't. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to ask for help. Tell me about when Lily got sick. David's hands began to shake. Her face started swelling, her stomach too. She was so tired all the time. I knew she needed a doctor, but I didn't have money, and I was terrified that if I took her to a hospital, they'd see we were homeless, that they'd take my girls away from me. So what did you do? I searched online. I found websites that said there were natural remedies, that you didn't need doctors, that these mixtures could help. He sobbed. I was desperate. I thought I was saving her. What was in the mixture? Herbs, vinegar, things the website said were safe. I followed the instructions exactly, but when Lily drank it, she cried. She said it hurt. David's voice dropped to a whisper. And then she got worse. The swelling got worse. She stopped eating, and I realized I was making everything worse. Laura kept her voice steady. What happened after that? David's expression became distant, disconnected. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything just shut down. He looked at Laura with empty eyes. I told the girls to wait, that I'd figure it out. But when I started walking, I just kept walking. I don't even remember deciding to leave. My mind just went somewhere else. Rachel Torres spoke up. Detective, my client clearly experienced a severe dissociative episode triggered by untreated depression and prolonged trauma. Laura nodded. I can see that. She looked at David. Mr. Bennett, you left 2 children alone for 3 days. One of them was critically ill. Do you understand how serious that is? Yes. David's voice was hollow. And I'll never forgive myself. Never. Do you want to see your daughters? David's face crumpled completely. More than anything, but I don't deserve to. I failed them. I failed Rebecca. I failed everyone. That's not for you to decide right now, Laura said quietly. She paused, choosing her words. Mr. Bennett, I've been a detective for 16 years. I've seen people who hurt children deliberately, people who are cruel. You're not one of them. David looked up, surprised. You're a man who broke under impossible circumstances. That doesn't excuse what you did. Lily could have died, but it explains it. Laura leaned forward slightly. The question now is, are you willing to get the help you need? Anything, David whispered. I'll do anything, Rachel interjected. Detective, I'm formally requesting full psychiatric evaluation for my client. He clearly needs treatment, not just punishment. I agree, Laura said, but he also needs to be held accountable for his actions. She stood. Mr. Bennett, you're going to be formally charged with child endangerment and medical neglect. Given your mental state and the circumstances, the court will likely consider treatment-focused sentencing. But that's not my decision to make. David nodded, defeated. Is there anything you want me to tell Emily and Lily? David's hands trembled violently. Tell Emily. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her more than life itself. His voice broke. And tell her she was braver and stronger than I ever was. Tell her she did everything right. That none of this was her fault. Laura wrote it down. I'll make sure she knows. As officers led David back to holding, Laura stood in the hallway with Officer Helen Carter, who'd been observing. What do you think? Helen asked. I think he's telling the truth. I think he's a broken man who made catastrophic choices. Laura sighed. But Emily was right in her statement. This isn't just about him. It's about everyone who walked past. Yes, Laura looked toward the exit, and that's the part people don't want to face. 4 days after David's arrest, Emily sat in Dr. Sarah Winter's office, a warm room with soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and shelves filled with books and stuffed animals. But Emily didn't look comfortable. She sat perfectly straight, back not touching the cushion, hands folded precisely in her lap. Dr. Winters noticed immediately. "Emily, you can relax here. You can sit however you want." Emily didn't move. "I'm okay like this." Dr. Winters smiled gently. "Can I ask you something? When did you start sitting that way, so carefully, so straight?" Emily thought about it. "After Mama died. I wanted people to think I was okay, that I could handle things." "Why was that important to you?" "Because if I looked scared or messy, people might think something was wrong, and then they might take us away from Daddy." Dr. Winters nodded slowly. "So you trained yourself to sit straight, to speak carefully, to look strong even when you weren't." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "How did you know?" "Because I can see it. You don't move like most 10-year-olds. You move like someone who's been practicing how to be an adult." Emily looked down. "I had to. Someone had to take care of Lily." "That's exactly what I mean," Dr. Winters said gently. "You learned very early that the adults around you couldn't help. So you became the adult. You practiced being responsible, being calm, being invisible, because you thought that's what would keep you safe." Emily's voice trembled. "But it didn't work. Lily still got sick. Daddy still left." "Exactly. Because you're not supposed to be able to fix everything. You're a child. Children deserve to be protected, not protectors. But there wasn't anyone else." "I know, and that's heartbreaking." Dr. Winters paused. "Emily, you've been carrying weight that was never yours to carry. And when you hold something that heavy for that long, you start to believe it's your responsibility forever." Emily was crying now, not the silent, controlled tears she'd learned, but real, full sobs. Dr. Winters moved to sit beside her, not touching, just present. "It's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be a child who's scared and hurting." "I don't know how," Emily whispered between sobs. "I don't know how to stop being the one who watches everything. We'll learn together. One day at a time." After several minutes, Emily's crying slowed. She wiped her face. "Can I tell you something?" Emily asked quietly. "Always. When Officer Carter found us, I wasn't scared of her. I was scared I'd say the wrong thing, that I'd use the wrong words and make everything worse." Emily looked at Dr. Winters. "That's why I practiced. I practiced what I would say if someone finally stopped." Dr. Winters felt her chest tighten. "You practiced asking for help?" "Yes. Because I knew I only had one chance. If I said it wrong, they might not believe me, or they might take Lily away from me. So I had to get the words exactly right. And that's why you said, 'My dad tried to help and failed.'" Emily nodded. "Those were the truest words I could find. He did try, and he did fail, and I needed someone to understand both things at the same time." Dr. Winters had to take a moment. This child, this 10-year-old, had been so alone, so frightened, that she'd rehearsed asking for help like it was a performance, choosing words, controlling her tone, sitting just right, because she'd learned that being a child wasn't enough. You had to be perfect, controlled, strong. "Emily," Dr. Winters said softly, "you shouldn't have had to train yourself to be strong. You should have been protected. But I wasn't. No, you weren't. And that's not your fault. It's the fault of every adult who should have seen you and didn't." Emily absorbed that silently. "There's going to be a hearing in a few months," Dr. Winters said. "A lot of people will talk about what happened. You might be asked if you want to speak. You don't have to. But if you do, what would you want people to know?" Emily thought for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "I'd want them to know that I wasn't asking to be saved. I just wanted someone to stop." 3 months later, the Millbrook Community Center was filled beyond capacity. Every seat was taken. People stood along the walls, crowded in the doorways. News cameras lined the back of the room. This wasn't a trial. Not yet. It was a community hearing, called by Judge Patricia Lawson, to review what had happened to the Bennett family and to determine what should happen next. At the front table sat Judge Lawson, flanked by Margaret Hayes, Detective Laura Brennan, and Dr. Pemberton. To the side sat David Bennett with his public defender, Rachel Torres. He wore a clean shirt but still looked broken, diminished, A few rows back sat Emily, holding Lily's hand. Lily looked completely transformed, healthy, vibrant, her face no longer swollen, her eyes bright. But she stayed close to Emily, holding tight. Judge Lawson tapped her gavel. The room fell silent. This hearing has been called to examine the circumstances surrounding Emily and Lily Bennett, and to understand how we, as a community, can prevent this from happening again. She looked out at the packed room. I remind everyone, these are real children. This is their real life. We will proceed with dignity and respect. Murmurs of agreement. First, I'd like to hear from Dr. Pemberton regarding Lily Bennett's medical condition. Dr. Pemberton stood and approached the microphone. He spoke clearly, deliberately. Lily Bennett was admitted to Mercy Hospital with severe malnutrition, untreated infections, and acute kidney stress causing fluid retention. The immediate trigger was a homemade remedy her father administered. However, the critical condition had been developing for months. The room stirred uncomfortably. This child's body didn't fail all at once, Dr. Pemberton continued, his voice firm. It was giving up while the world walked past. The silence that followed was crushing. Several people in the audience shifted in their seats, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Next, Detective Brennan spoke. Our investigation found no evidence of deliberate cruelty. David Bennett was experiencing severe untreated depression and had a dissociative episode. However, our investigation also revealed that at least 26 people saw Emily and Lily Bennett repeatedly over several weeks. Some noticed something seemed wrong, but no one intervened. A woman in the fourth row covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. Margaret Hayes stood next. I've been a social worker for 23 years. This is not a case of intentional harm. This is a case of systemic collapse. A grieving man who lost everything and had no support system, and 2 children who became invisible while living in full public view. Judge Lawson nodded slowly. Then she did something unexpected. I'd like everyone in this room who saw Emily and Lily Bennett before they were found to please raise their hand. The room went completely still. Then, slowly, hands began to rise. 1, 5, 10, 20, more. Nearly a third of the room. Judge Lawson's expression remained calm, but her voice carried weight. Thank you. You may lower your hands. She paused. Now, how many of you stopped to ask if those children were okay? To offer help? Every hand went down. Not one remained raised. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. Judge Lawson let it sit for a long moment. I see. It appears we have much to discuss today. She looked around the room. The question everyone wants answered is, who is responsible for what happened to these children? But perhaps the question we should be asking is, who wasn't responsible? Who saw and did nothing? An elderly man in the back stood up, his voice shaking. I walk past the Morrison building every morning. I saw those girls. More than once. And I kept walking because I thought someone else, someone more capable, would help them. A woman near the front spoke next, tears streaming down her face. I work in the building. I saw them sitting there for days, and I told myself their parents must be inside, that it wasn't my place to interfere. One by one, people began to speak, confessing, explaining, trying to understand how they'd all walked past 2 children in desperate need. And the phrase kept repeating, like a mantra of collective guilt. I thought someone else was taking care of it. Judge Lawson listened to each confession without judgment. Then she said quietly, It seems this community is finally ready to ask the hard questions. She turned to Emily. Emily Bennett, I understand you'd like to say something. You don't have to. But if you want to, we're ready to listen. Emily looked at Lily, who squeezed her hand and whispered, You can do it, Emmy. Emily stood slowly. The entire room held its breath. She walked to the microphone, small and composed. This was the moment when everything would finally be said. Emily stood at the microphone, looking out at the packed room. Hundreds of eyes watched her. Cameras recorded, people waited. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble. She just stood there, perfectly straight, hands at her sides, like she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. Judge Lawson spoke gently. "Take your time, Emily." Emily took a slow breath, the same deliberate breath Officer Carter had noticed that first morning. Then she began, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Emily Bennett. I'm 10 years old." She paused. "And for 3 months, everyone has been asking the same question. What happened to us? Who did this to my sister?" The room was completely silent. "I understand why people want to know. Because what happened was bad. Really bad. My sister almost died. And someone needs to be responsible." Emily looked at her father, who sat with his head bowed, tears streaming down his face. "My dad made terrible mistakes. He gave Lily something that hurt her. He left us alone when we needed him most." Her voice remained calm, factual. "Those are true things, and they matter." She turned back to the audience. "But before you decide he's the only one responsible, I want to tell you something else." Emily's voice grew stronger. "I know how to cross the street by myself. I learned when I was 7. I know how to hold my sister's head when she coughs so she doesn't choke. I learned that when Mama got sick. I know how to make a bottle of water last 2 days. I know how to sit very still so people don't notice you. I know how to choose words carefully so adults don't get scared." Her words landed like stones in still water. "I learned all of that because nobody else was there to help. And when I finally needed someone, really, truly needed someone, I didn't know how to ask without sounding wrong." Emily paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight beyond her years. "I knew how to do all these grown-up things, but I didn't know how to ask for help without feeling like I was doing something wrong." A woman in the 3rd row began crying quietly. "Everyone wants to know who did this to us," Emily continued. "And I think a lot of people did. Not just my dad." She looked around the room. "All the people who saw us sitting outside that building. All the people who wondered if we were okay but didn't stop. All the people who thought, someone else will take care of it." The silence was absolute. Emily delivered the line that would echo long after the hearing ended. Maybe the question shouldn't be who did this. Maybe the question should be, who didn't do anything when they could have? The room erupted, not in argument but in recognition. In painful, undeniable recognition. Emily wasn't done. "I'm not saying my dad didn't do wrong things. He did. But we didn't just need him to be better, we needed someone, anyone, to stop, to ask, to care." Her voice softened but remained clear. "I wasn't asking for someone to save us. I just wanted someone to stop." The final sentence hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity. Emily walked back to her seat. Lily immediately wrapped her arms around her sister, and Emily finally let herself cry. Real, full tears. Judge Lawson had to wait several minutes for the room to quiet. Many people were crying. Others sat in stunned silence, confronting a truth they'd been avoiding. Finally, the judge spoke. "Thank you, Emily. That was extraordinarily brave." She looked out at the crowd. "I think we've heard enough to understand what happened here. This wasn't about one person failing. It was about many people, a whole community. Looking away when looking closely would have changed everything." Judge Lawson's voice was firm but not harsh. "Mr. Bennett, you will be held accountable for your actions, but you're not the only one who bears responsibility for what happened to your daughters." She turned to the audience. "The rest of you need to ask yourselves, what will you do differently next time? Because there will be a next time. There's always another family struggling in silence, another child waiting to be seen." Officer Helen Carter stood at the back of the room, tears streaming down her face. She thought about those 6 words Emily had said that first morning. "My dad tried to help, and failed." At the time, Helen had frozen, thinking the worst, preparing for the worst. But now she understood. Emily hadn't been accusing. She'd been explaining how someone could try their hardest and still fail, how love wasn't enough without help, how families could collapse in plain sight while everyone assumed someone else was watching. They were there, Helen thought, right there, and we all kept walking. until one 10-year-old girl found 6 words careful enough, true enough, powerful enough to make us finally stop, 3 months later. Autumn had arrived in Millbrook, painting the trees in shades of gold and amber. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and falling leaves. Emily and Lily lived with the Calloway family now, a warm, stable home with 2 bedrooms and a backyard. Mrs. Calloway was patient and kind. Mr. Calloway worked at the library and brought home books for the girls every week. It wasn't perfect. Emily still woke up sometimes at night checking to make sure Lily was breathing. She still sat too straight at the dinner table. She still chose her words carefully before speaking. But she was learning, slowly. Dr. Winters saw her twice a week. "You don't have to be the grown-up anymore," she reminded Emily gently. "You can just be 10. It was harder than it sounded. Lily was healing faster. She laughed now, played, went to preschool. She had friends. Sometimes Emily watched her sister run and jump and be completely carefree, and felt both joy and a strange sadness. Joy that Lily was okay. Sadness that she herself couldn't remember what that kind of freedom felt like. David was in a residential psychiatric treatment facility, part of his plea agreement. He'd pled guilty to child endangerment and medical neglect. The judge had sentenced him to 5 years of supervised probation with mandatory treatment instead of prison time. It had been controversial. Some thought he deserved jail. Others thought the sentence was appropriate given the circumstances. Emily was allowed supervised visits once a month. The first had been impossibly hard. David had cried. Emily had stayed quiet. Lily had asked, "Why did you leave us, Daddy?" David had no answer that made sense to a 4-year-old. But slowly, visit by visit, they were finding words. Not the family they'd been, that was gone forever, but something new, something honest. At the Morrison building, changes were visible. After the hearing, a group of concerned citizens had formed the Millbrook Family Support Network. They created a system where trained volunteers regularly checked on families who might be struggling, not intrusively, but with genuine care. The elementary school hired additional social workers and implemented a strict protocol for following up on absent students within 1 week, not 3 months. The police department, with Officer Helen Carter's help, developed new training on recognizing families in crisis. "Look for the ones trying not to be noticed," Helen told recruits. "The ones who seem too composed, too careful. Those are the ones who need us most." Near the Morrison building, someone had placed a small bench with a plaque, in recognition of Emily and Lily Bennett. "May we always choose to stop, to see, to care." One afternoon, a woman named Patricia, the cafe owner, began carrying small cards in her pocket. On each card was printed, "Are you okay? Do you need help? I'm here to listen." She wasn't the only one making small changes. The elderly man who'd confessed at the hearing now stopped to talk with anyone who looked like they might need a kind word. Kevin Ross, the IT worker who'd left water but walked away, now volunteered at a family shelter every Saturday. Some people still walked past those in need. Old habits were hard to break, but more people were stopping, more people were asking. More people were refusing to assume that someone else would handle it. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a miracle, but it was better than before. Emily and Lily visited the Morrison building one Saturday with Mrs. Calloway, not to relive trauma, but because Emily had asked to see it. They stood on the sidewalk where they'd sat for so many days. "Do you remember this place?" Mrs. Calloway asked gently. "Yes," Emily said, "but it feels different now." It did feel different. People walked past, but now some of them smiled, nodded. One person even stopped and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Just a small interaction, but it meant someone saw them, someone acknowledged them. Emily watched Lily skip ahead, completely unaware of the weight this place had once held. And Emily realized she wasn't watching for danger anymore. She was just watching, the way a big sister should 6 months later. Emily sat on a bench at Riverside Park, watching Lily play on the swings. The spring sun was warm, birds sang in the trees, children's laughter filled the air. It was an ordinary, beautiful day. Lily pumped her legs, going higher and higher, her red hair flying behind her like a banner. "Emmy, look how high I'm going." Emily smiled. I see you, Lil. You're doing great. Mrs. Calloway sat beside Emily, holding 2 ice cream cones. She handed one to Emily. Thought you might like this? Thank you. Emily took it carefully. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lily play. And then Emily noticed something that made her chest feel lighter. A little boy sat alone on a bench near the fountain, looking uncertain. A woman walking past slowed, then stopped. Hey there, are you okay? Where's your grown-up? The boy pointed toward the restrooms. My dad's in there. The woman smiled. Okay, I'll wait with you until he comes back. She sat down beside the boy, patient and present, until his father emerged a minute later. Emily watched the entire interaction, something warm spreading through her. Someone had stopped. Someone had noticed. Someone had cared. A few feet away, an elderly man dropped his cane. A teenager immediately stopped to help him pick it up. A young mother struggled with a stroller on the path. 2 people moved to help without being asked. Small moments, small kindnesses, people noticing, people stopping. Lily ran over, breathless and beaming. Emmy, can we come back tomorrow? Emily pulled her into a hug. Yeah, we can come back whenever you want. Lily settled onto Emily's lap, content. Mrs. Calloway smiled at both of them, and Emily realized something profound. She wasn't looking in all directions anymore. She wasn't counting exits. She wasn't preparing for the worst. She was just there, present. Because for the first time, she wasn't alone. As the afternoon wore on, Emily thought about everything that had brought them here. The Morrison building, the hospital, the hearing, the long months of healing. She thought about her father, slowly getting better in treatment. About visits that were still awkward but getting easier. She thought about Officer Carter, who still checked in on them sometimes. About Dr. Winters, who was teaching her how to be a child again. About all the people who'd finally stopped. And she thought about the people who'd walked past when they needed help most. She'd been angry at them once, confused, hurt. But now she mostly felt tired of being angry, because some of those same people were the ones stopping now, asking now, caring now. The world hadn't been magically fixed. People still failed each other sometimes. But it was different now, better, because people were paying attention. Not everyone, not perfectly, but enough. Emily looked at Lily one more time, laughing, playing, completely free, safe, seen, protected. And Emily realized she wasn't watching everyone else anymore, because this time other people were watching too. Not just one person carrying the weight alone, but many people, a community, finally awake. Mrs. Calloway noticed Emily's expression. What are you thinking about? Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said simply, I'm thinking that I'm not scared anymore. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Because, Emily continued, I'm not alone and neither is Lily. Mrs. Calloway squeezed her shoulder gently. As the sun began to set over the park, casting everything in golden light, Emily leaned back against the bench. She perceived something simple. She wasn't looking in all directions, because for the first time she wasn't alone. And that one simple truth, made all the difference. The end final message. Sometimes the greatest danger to a family isn't cruelty. It's the comfortable, polite silence that allows suffering to grow in plain sight, while everyone believes someone else will act. This time, may we all choose to stop, to see, to care, because the children waiting to be noticed are counting on us.